Really cozy up here. I feel like I could just hang out with you and bring out the guests in a little bit of time, but we actually have a really cool conversation coming up, so I'm not going to waste too much introducing it. The Adderall Diaries is a really fascinating movie. It's adapted from a book, and it's a really incredible story about a guy who's struggling with his past on a lot of different levels. And it stars James Franco and Ed Harris in two of their more sort of shocking performances I've seen in quite some time. So we're going to dig into that with a couple of people who are involved in that movie. And after we're done, I hope that some of you will go check out the other Apple Talks that we have coming up at the store. We love working with these guys each year and curating a selection of films and filmmakers that are at the festival. And I think, honestly, this is the best year we've had to date. So I'm really happy with the guests that we've got coming up, so I hope you'll come back for more. But before we do that, let's talk about the Adderall Diaries. So please join me in welcoming director Pamela Romanowsky, director of photography Bruce Thierry Cheung, and a man who needs no introduction, but we'll give him one anyway, Ed Harris. So I didn't want to get anything wrong about sort of the context of this film. So maybe Pamela, you can give us a little bit of background. Sometimes we show trailers from the film, but we didn't have one today. So can you tell us a little bit about sort of the source material here and how you became aware of it?
Sure. We're here with the Adderall Diaries. It premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival last night. It was our world premiere. And the story is about a writer whose father shows up and accuses him of lying about his past. And so it's sort of an exploration of memory and about how the stories we tell inform our identities and about how those things are often malleable and people who share a history don't necessarily share the same story.
Now, a lot of times when people are making their first feature, they tackle something that's sort of, easy going, maybe a little light to, get your feet wet. This is sort of the opposite of that. It's a pretty dark story, and it's got a lot of heavy stuff going on. So how did you end up sort of singling out this particular one for your first feature?
Well, that answer has two parts to it. The first is I read the book just as a casual reader first because I live next to an awesome bookstore called Word in Brooklyn. And like many books I pick up, it's because I saw them in the window and went in and got a recommendation. So as a reader, I loved the book. It really stuck with me, and there's a lot to think about within it. And then separately from that, James Franco, who is a friend of mine from grad school, he and Bruce and I all went to NYU together. And we'd made a short film together that became part of a multi-director omnibus film called The Color of Time. And we loved working together, and so he offered to help me make a first feature and brought this book to me as a project to adapt. And it was great creative synchronicity and a book I already loved, so it was a very easy yes.
So Ed, how about you? Were you aware of this book before the project came to you? Or?
No, I wasn't. I go out to the Sundance Film Lab in June when I'm not working as an advisor, and several Junes ago, Pamela was one of the fellows who was working on scenes from this story. And so I worked with her, I was just there for a week, but we worked several times on some of the different scenes with other actors, that were there, brought in. And, really liked Pamela. I really thought that she was very focused on what she wanted to do. She had a lot of work ahead of her. She was still working on the script, but we had a good time. And when she asked me if I would play the father when she got ready to film it, and I said yeah. And so I had not read the book prior, but I did, of course, read it when she asked me to be a part of it.
So Bruce, tell us a little bit about your background here, because you all went to NYU together, so you'd worked together in the past, but was this the first feature that you worked on as well as a cinematographer?
It's not, as Pam mentioned earlier, we were friends from NYU, and we had worked on this film called The Color of Time, which was like a movie where they had 8 directors, and we all kind of co-directed scenes from the film, kind of put it together. And I think that was the first project where I guess got to know James through, and James kind of brought me on to other features that he was kind of directing on his own. A film called The Sound of Fury, another film called Bukowski, and it was just really fun, just like kind of building. I guess I've been lucky to have friends like Pam and James, and that we've been able to build with and like keep growing with as filmmakers. Yeah.
Well, we should talk a little bit about the tone of this movie because it's very particular. It goes between two different time periods, this troubled youth and the present day. It's got moments that are sort of exciting with the, sort of the Franco character living this writer life and being successful, and then much darker moments. So how did you sort of map out the tenor of different scenes as you were figuring out what sort of movie you wanted this to be?
I think, there's an idea that a film, especially the way that you edit it, is like a symphony or like a piece of music, in that any tempo, no matter how exciting or how soothing, you would grow tired of eventually. So in the writing and in the editing and on set, I think it was always a matter of sort of finding what the right tempo for that part in the movie was, and trying to find a way to make these very big or violent or intense scenes feel real and feel human and relatable. So I think there's always kind of a sense of humility and of gracefulness. Bruce and I, the visual style had, we used a lot of Steadicam, and Bruce is just sort of a poetic and intuitive person, and so that camera style kind of lent itself to, the ability to be free and be organic in what we were shooting.
Well, how about performance? Because there's a whole history of, really troubled father-son relationships that have been portrayed on screen, and there's always that danger that you can go over the top. Ed, what's your sort of way of your sort of barometer, let's say, for figuring out, how do you go up to that point without crossing it? You want to make it believable.
I like crossing that point and making it believable. So, I mean, this guy, especially the history scene, the scenes when he was younger, in the editing, you just see kind of glimpses of these things, but we shot them as complete scenes. I mean, there was a lot more going on, and it got Timothy, who plays the younger version of James's character. He was really game, because I smacked him around quite a bit. I mean, it was very violent, and very real. I thought I didn't think there was any chance of going too far with it. I mean, we were careful. Obviously, nobody got hurt, but and so I don't know. I guess I've been doing this for a while, so I have certain bullshit barometer that I don't cross. Because it starts going.
Right. Well, what was the tone like for you guys on set? I mean, when you're doing scenes like that, does it feel like you're sort of in the zone and there with the characters, or do you go in and out?
Oh, it's very intense, I mean, and these guys, the Pamela and Bruce and the rest of the crew were very, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. There's the S&M stuff that James does, and, so it was very sensitive, the crew was very sensitive to whatever was going on with the actors, and I never felt like I couldn't do what I had to do, and just go for it, I mean, that was the whole feeling of the shoot for me was you got to go for it here, man. Don't hold back. I mean, if something's too much, Pamela will say, but in terms of putting it out there, that's my job,
Pamela, what about for you just sort of directing through some of these moments? I mean, as Ed said, there's some really intense sexuality and drug use and so forth, and need to make it believable, in a way that draws people into this experience. So when you're doing multiple takes, I imagine there must be some sort of protocol for figuring out what exactly you want. How did you sort of figure out what that was?
Like to limit the number of takes, do you mean?
Well, not that technical. I mean, it's more just about figuring out how you want this to come across on the screen.
I think kind of what Ed said is there's like an internal barometer that tells you when it feels true and when it feels right. And I had the privilege of working with a really incredible cast and a really incredible DP and a really incredible crew. So, these are people who I trust completely, and it always feels like you're working towards the same goal. So I think there's just a moment where it's clear and things gel and you're on set and, there's magic there and the scene feels how it's supposed to feel. And I kind of think everybody knows that. If after that anyone wants to make an adjustment, then we do that. But we didn't have to do a whole lot of takes. I think, like Ed said, everyone went for it. And so it's pretty easy to accomplish what we wanted emotionally, and then, you cover it.
And to establish that atmosphere with actors, especially of trust, it really comes down from the top. It comes down from Pamela and who she cast, and because you got to have people that are willing, to trust and be trusted. And then all the way down the line, the actors were there to help serve her vision of this thing, and so, that's what you're trying to do.
And Bruce, when you're behind the camera, you're not directing, but are there ways in which you feel like as a collaborator you can sort of influence the direction of the film and how things are going? It's not purely just a technical job for you.
Yeah, I feel like for this movie here, where we have such a great cast and it's such an instinctual, intuitive project, I try to be a little bit as invisible as possible. In the get-go, I kind of want to give Ed and James and Amber the freedom as much freedom as possible to occupy the space and own a scene. And after watching the rehearsals, it's me and my team, we kind of react to it and be instinctive to it. We shot a Steadicam and long lenses to kind of give ourselves maximum flexibility in terms of movement and to be out of the way, to kind of shoot from far away, or to come in and come out as nimbly as possible. And I don't want the actors or Pam to ever wait on the technology side of things, on the camera side. I know they want to move fast, so I want to be there with them and move just as quick. So.
Now, what sort of expectation did you guys have going into this? You've got, obviously you knew James, but at the same time you've got name actors involved in a project which a lot of people spend years trying to make happen. Was it daunting, or did you just kind of go with it?
It was very reassuring. I think, I already knew Ed and really trusted him. I already knew James and trusted him. And everyone in my cast, in addition to being great actors, are great people who I connected with and really wanted to be there. So as a first-time director, it's a pretty incredible privilege to have that kind of firepower behind you and have that kind of trust. So no, it was the opposite of intimidating. I felt like I had, incredible teammates and everything that I needed to attack this project.
And how long was the shoot?
27 days, I think.
So about average. Did it feel like it went quickly for you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like it happened yesterday. It was a year ago.
What surprised you about the way that things came together?
Well, it was my first feature, so in a way, everything's surprising. I was just telling Ed that I got to the set the first day and saw the little parking permit signs, and I always kind of look at those around the neighborhood just because I'm in film and curious, and they say the Adderall Diaries, and I see the trucks, and I was sort of processing, and I was like, this is my movie. It's really happening. And then I saw Bruce, and then I saw Ed, and from that moment on, it was light bulb, bing, here we go. And so it was a real pleasure. There were tons of surprises along the way, but all great. I think one of the great joys of directing is that what you have in your head and then what ends up being in front of you are different. And that's because every person who you're collaborating with is bringing themselves and sort of breathing life into it in a way that makes it real. So, Ed and James and the cast have really great instincts and, bring their own surprises with them. Bruce would come up with beautiful shots I never would have thought of in the moment. And there were all kinds of sort of happy accidents that happen that end up being some of my favorite moments.
Ed, as somebody who's been doing this, as you said, for a long time, do you still experience this sort of freshness on a new film shoot, or is it just a routine at this point?
No, the moment, cameras, set up, you rehearse, and the act between action and cut, you know, still very exciting. I like doing it.
Well, that's the crucial thing. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
Because you never know, you know, what you might come up with. I mean, it's always, I enjoy take two, whatever is going to happen. You just keep trying to explore the character and the particular scene, and hopefully it's working.
Do you figure out as sort of the whole backstory in terms of what we don't see versus what we do see? I mean, how much of what's not in the film is part of sort of how you relate?
Yeah,
to
well, you know, I
see?
mean, Neil, the Stephen's father, is still alive, and he actually wrote a couple of novels himself, which I think I started one. I said, wow, okay, I get the idea here. But yeah, I mean, I did a lot of, you know, you just do, you know, the script was very strong, and the book is the book, so, you know, you have that, and, you know, you just kind of, I didn't really do that much other research other than just a lot of thought about it, you know, and you know, the relationship with his son. I mean, I don't have a son, but I have a daughter, and obviously, I mean, thank God my relationship with her is not anything like this relationship, but it's still a parental thing, and you know that bond, you know, which is eternal. So there was a lot of stuff I could deal with.
Pamela, how much sort of communication with the real life characters did you have, sort of figuring out how to tell this story?
I didn't meet anyone except for Stephen, who was really helpful to me from early on, especially when I was first starting work on the screenplay. I met with him a couple of times. And, you know, in addition to his book, so much of what he told me and just watching him, you know, it's a film about a lot about a guy's inner life. So just being able to watch someone sort of process and understand his psychology was a pretty unique thing. I don't think there are many times you can like call your main character up and ask them a question. So it was really cool. And then I think, you know, at some point, if you're adapting something into a screenplay, you know, no matter how much you love that book, you put it on the shelf. You can't hurt the book. The book is still going to be there, and, you know, you have to make it into a movie.
Has he seen the final result yet?
Yeah, he was there last night.
So you had this big screening. Did you get a sense for what he felt in terms of how it played compared
For
to
what he felt or what I felt?
what he felt? We'll get to what you felt in a minute.
I can't really speak for his feelings. I'm not sure, but I'm also curious. So we should ask him. I felt great. I think, you know, you sit alone with the movie in a tiny room for a lot of the time, editing it and color correcting. And I love being on set, and magic happens. I mean, it just does. There's like this strange alchemy, and things gel, and it's real. And then that magic goes away for a really long time. And then at some point, you know, when you're finishing, the magic's kind of back. And then, you know, showing it to an audience for the first time is really exciting, because that's the whole point, is to communicate and to connect with people. And so hearing and feeling people react to it and connect with it is really awesome.
Now, before we go to an audience Q&A, you had this big screening last night at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, which is a crowd that's probably much larger than movies made on much bigger budgets can sometimes get into a theater. So it's a huge deal. And it also, I imagine, can be surreal for somebody who works on, you know, a relatively low budget movie and doesn't have distribution and so forth. So what sort of expectations do you have for making these kinds of movies? I mean, does getting to the finish line with one project inform the steps you want to take at this point, given the different kinds of challenges involved in getting your work out there?
I don't know. It's my first movie, so I'm just really glad that, you know, to have finished it. And I have a couple other projects kind of in mind. I think as far as scale, you know, one director I admire a lot is Steven Soderbergh, who does tiny movies and does huge movies. And I think there's something to be said for letting the content of the movie dictate like how much money you're going to spend on it and what you think your audience is going to be. So I would love to be the kind of director who can work in all kinds of different ranges and medium.
And Ed, you've worked on all kinds of scales, both as actor and director. Is there a sort of sweet spot as far as you're concerned, or what sort of advice do you have on that front?
I don't know, the business is changing so much, so I've done a lot of independent films in the past few years, and most of them nobody even knows about because they come and go so fast, at least in the theaters, if they even get to the theaters. And they do this whole thing now where it's on video on demand initially, and then they open the thing for a weekend, and you go, well, wait a minute, and with no advertising at all. And so you say, well, how is anybody supposed to know about this film? And they go, well, it's been on VOD for several weeks, so that's letting them know it's going to come in the theaters. And when it's in the theaters, that's letting them know it's on VOD. And we don't have to spend a effing nickel, And it's absurd. So I don't really know. I finally found another project I want to do, and I don't know where it'll end up. I mean, it's weird. It's a strange time. I mean, the cineplexes are filled with huge, huge, huge budgeted films, and there are so many independent. I mean, look at the film festival. There's so many independent films made every year. Many of them are really fine films, and it's just, how do you find them?
Maybe somebody in the audience knows. Why don't we open it up for a Q&A?
So, Ed, I was curious. You've worked with big directors. You've worked with small directors. The question was asked a little bit about what the difference is, what it is working with a young director, a new director. Are there certain little special experiences that you get from that, certain discoveries, a level of freedom, or that you don't get from a more seasoned director where there's sort of a level of expectations? And talk about maybe some special moments here in the filming of this film.
Well, it's just really, it's the material that dictates a lot of that. And I mean, I worked not long ago on this thing, Geostorm, big picture, Dean Devlin doing it, Bradley Cooper, etc. And most of the time I was being directed for the camera. In other words, this is the shot I need you to be here, etc., etc. This film is like, this is what we're doing, the camera will find out how to film us, okay? And so that's the kind of two extremes, and then that's, it's fine. I mean, I enjoyed both processes. I don't remember exactly the nature of what your question was, but
or maybe some special moment here that just because it's a new experience.
Well, I mean, I loved working with Pamela because, first of all, a lot of times, first-time directors, and especially, people, they're not making independent films and make any money. It's not about that. You know what I mean? It's about passion, and it's about wanting to say something, having a voice, and having material that you just want to, it's like a painter or a musician or a composer. It's like, I've got to do it. I've got to put this out there for no other reason than I'm being driven to do so. And so to be a part of that and to try to serve her vision, it's exciting, It's a two-way street. I mean, you're giving and you're getting, and you're just hoping you're contributing to help this thing work as a piece of art. But I don't remember any specific. The one scene that I wish was in there was when I handcuffed my son to the pipe when he's trying to kill himself, slit his wrists, and he says something really mean to me. There's no dialogue in these scenes because it's visual. But he said this really nasty thing, and I went boom, 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 right across his face, And then I think I kissed him or something, and then walked away. And I just really loved that moment because it was so instinctive, and Timothy was totally cool. He was just like, But
So
for some reason, she didn't put it in the movie.
For the record, it's because the shot does not tell you that's what's happening. It's like backs.
Oh, you don't see it?
No.
This is actually a moment that
That's the downside.
It's a memorable moment, though.
It is. I will always remember it. That's the
And
downside.
Timothy
to
won't forget it.
No.
But
That's
he
the one downside to
describes
the
it.
camera finds the action is sometimes you miss it.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's in a monologue, yes. I mean, he picked up the slack.
Well,
in that sense.
I'll remember it. It was amazing. My jaw was like on the floor, and then I rolled it back up and carried on.
My question's more directed towards Pamela, though also Ed and Bruce. I'd love to know what in the story essentially kind of hit your gut and was the push inside of you personally to make you want to make this film?
For me, it was the idea that two people could have a shared history but not a shared story, and the idea that a villain in one version of it might cast themselves very differently in their telling. And I, like Ed said, have lovely family, and so that my relationship with my parents is not at all like that. They're here, in fact, and they're wonderful. But I think there are people in my life who I feel burned by, and there are things that have traumatized me, and there's some degree of empathy, I think, in healing that can come from looking at how the other person might tell that story and realizing that a lot of the way we construct narratives about painful things has to do with the need to cope or the need to make sense of it, and I just think there's something sort of humble and humanizing in that process.
Hi, I was wondering, when you first find out that the project is going through and that it's going to be the real thing, there must be there must be the novelty of like, wow, this is going to be a big deal. And is there a moment where there's like insecurity about, is this going to be good? Is this going to be what I want it to be? And then you get to work and it just happens. Like, I guess that wasn't really a question, but
I would say yes, 100% of the time. There is insecurity and excitement and hope. That's what makes it exciting and unpredictable.
I read on the film festival site that this is the first year that they've had such a large selection from female filmmakers. And Pamela, I was kind of hoping you could speak to that and kind of talk about what you think the future is for filmmaking and what women's role is inside that.
Sure. I always have a hard time with that question because I think the goal is to be asked about being a filmmaker and not a female, and it will be great when that isn't a question anymore. At the same time, it's a sexist industry like many are. And it's exciting to see more women directing. That said, there have always been women directing. And I think that's changing and changing fast. And yeah, Tribeca does have a record number of female directors. I think, they're a great festival, support young directors, female directors, New York directors. So I'm very glad to be a part of it.
Hi, this is for all three of you. Ed, when you were talking about the little indie movies being passion projects, I'm just wondering, given the changing nature of the business now, if any of you feel that going the premium TV series route is akin to that, or does that not do it for you? Does that not feel passionate? For example, if you took a book and you wanted to adapt it, would you consider maybe doing it as a limited series or do you just...
No, I mean, I think they're doing some obviously great stuff on the, cable networks and TV and stuff. And this thing I'm working on at the moment, I don't really know where it's going to end up. I mean, I'm hoping I can make it, feature-length film, but if the script ends up needing more time than that, I have nothing against trying to get a couple of hour and a half things or whatever it might be on whatever network or cable thing would give me the money to do it. We'll just see.
I would say the same. I think TV is a exciting place to be, and there are a lot of kind of avant-garde stories happening there. There are a lot of TV series I love. I would love to direct something. I mean,
you'd have more people seeing it on the, streamed whatever than I would putting it in an independent movie house for 4 weekends. That's for damn sure.
Mm-hmm.
You just did a TV series. You've been working on a TV series.
Well, I'm doing this HBO, this Westworld thing, which we shot the pilot for. And we're supposed to shoot 9 more episodes, but I don't think we're starting back up till July. But it's pretty cool, I think. You know, it's based on that old 70s film, you know, with Yul Brynner and Roland
Westworld.
yeah,
It's called, yeah.
Richard Benjamin.
So Pamela, it seems like everything kind of came together like a picture perfect puzzle. So I'm just wondering if there were any challenges and kind of how you dealt with those, and any advice to people in, you know, directing their first feature, things like that.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of obstacles along the way. I think, like Ed has spoken about, making an indie film and getting it financed and off the ground is a really hard thing. And it was not easy for us the whole way. I mean, we're speaking about it from the other side where it's done, but there were a lot of moments along the way where, you know, I had doubts about whether it would happen. And I think my primary advice to other filmmakers is to find your people and to be very grateful for them when you find them.
Hi guys, I'm Alexandria Collins. Just stumbled upon this. It's so amazing. So I love your work, Ed. I had a question, Pamela. I've just done short films and director as well, but how did you get people to really believe in your feature film project? Of course, having a great story is the basis, but like, what did you do to really get this project going? I didn't hear the first part if you did answer that question, but.
It's a tricky question. There's a lot of talking people into joining you on a movie. And I don't know how I
The
talked
Sundance
you
thing
into
was
it.
you know.
Yeah, actually that's a good point. Ed and I met at the Sundance Institute's Directors Lab. And that was a huge turning point in the life of this script, was getting to do the Screenwriters Lab, the Directors Lab. You know, it's a really incredible place and an incredible group of people. And it exists to help you make this film better, to make your story better, to hone your craft, and also to meet a whole bunch of people who can help you along the way. And because, you know, they do great work and it has generated some really great films, I think being a part of it just generates some degree of attention and interest. So that was absolutely a huge turning point in the project.
This question is for the three of you. And you guys were talking about being grateful. So as a filmmaker, I know that there's always, in each project, there's a moment that I take with me that's a special moment. I was wondering if each of you can share what your special moment was during the making of.
I still remember this one moment where it was like the scene we were doing with where Ed and James had a confrontation in James' apartment, and we just did the first take, and the first take was amazing, and we wanted to move on to close-ups. So I was lining up a long lens to get a close-up of Ed, and Ed was kind enough to stay on set and he got stand in. And when I lined the close-up, you were still in character, and you were almost crying, even though we weren't filming. You were still like in the moment and like living it out, living the confrontation out, and I was so, I guess, blown away and touched by that, because to work with the caliber of actor who just gives 100% makes you want to give 100% too in everything you do. You know, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah. I have so many to choose from, but I think one that comes to mind, since you guys are on either side of me, is there's a scene where Ed is delivering this kind of monologue into a camera, like to record a VHS tape. And, it's a really emotional scene and one of my favorites in the movie. And so getting to watch Ed do that scene, it was like a tiny set. I think it was just Bruce, another camera operator, people who were playing focus. And so I was sitting right next to you, like on a little Apple box with the monitor. And you did this monologue, and it was so beautiful and moving, and I was crying at the monitor. And then you look over, and Bruce is like, we had two cameras, so we're getting the shot we intended to get, and then Bruce has taken the steady cam and is doing this shot that kind of floats around him. And so the scene in the movie ends up being cut. There's a transition between those two shots, and so it's like we go from this tape to Ed in real life and get so much like access to him emotionally. And so I had these two amazing partners in getting that scene in it. That was one of those moments that just felt magical on set.
I don't know. I mean, that day was kind of cool because it was just, and we didn't do it very much.
No, 3 takes.
Did like a take or two, and it's where he's trying to apologize to his son via this video. He's recording himself. But I don't know. I mean, another special moment was this.
And the kiss.
But I just enjoyed working on it, the thing with Pamela, I mean, because this was fun. And I was just so I'm just so proud of her, because she made a film and she did a great job.
That slapping scene is going to make a great DVD outtake.
We're going to reshoot it.
Well, you can't see it, though.
Yeah, we'll reshoot it.
And working with James, I really enjoyed working with James. I'd never met him before. And he's such a busy guy. He was doing Of Mice and Men at the same time.
Yeah.
But he was always really present, and he was just right there. And we don't look anything alike in terms of father-son. I mean, he's dark eyes. But I totally buy that this is father and son because we had a good, relationship.
Hi. Well, my question is sort of along the way, but not really. Working on a film set is, besides being, a professional and, special and etc., it also can be fun. So I was wondering if you guys have any memorable anecdotes, especially if you're working with someone like James Franco or Ed Harris. I'm sure you had plenty. So, if you guys could share the ones that were most memorable for you, that would be great.
I had a great time. Ed always had these baseball gloves, and he'd play catch with the PAs. And I remember looking over a couple times, and we'd be going back on set, and whatever PA you'd been playing catch with would just be grinning ear to ear.
And by the way, I had a glove that I had had since I was 12 years old, 52 years old, 51 at the time, and I lost it, and I think I left it in my trailer or something. So if anybody's ever watching this and sees an old Jim Bunning model glove, says Ed Harris, Carmen Hall, which is at Columbia, 10th, 13th floor or something, contact me because I'd really like to get it back.
It's beautiful.
Calling all your production assistants.
Yeah.
So this wasn't the last time to see the movie last night. There's actually more screenings at the Tribeca Film Festival. When's the next opportunity?
There's a screening tonight. I think it's at 6:30. I don't know the dates off the top of my head, but they're all on the Tribeca website.
Easy enough to find, so hopefully people will go check it out. Thanks for being here, guys, and thanks for sticking around.